Hello everyone, my name is Divyashree Ramalingam and I'm a graduate student from the Department of Animal and Dairy Science. Today, the topic of discussion is the impact of legume forages on methane emissions of ruminants. So let's dive into it. Let me give you guys a brief introduction on this topic first. So beef and dairy cattle majorly constitute of the ruminant forage system that is used to meet the growing demands of our population. Now these ruminants are special organisms as they have a fermentation chamber named the rumen where most of the fermentation happens, and they are also capable of having fermentation in the hindgut. But this fermentation contributes a lot lesser to the nutrient utilization and even the methane emissions, but most of the fermentation takes place within the rumen, which is also a fermentation chamber. Now, there exists several microorganisms within this rumen. We have protozoans, we have fungi, we have bacteria, and we also have virus. Now, all of these organisms are capable of contributing towards the fermentation process. Now, when carbohydrates such as cellulose, hemicellulose, or even pectin are fermented, there are certain products that are released, end products. Now, these end products are mostly carbon dioxide, hydrogen gas, methane, and even nitrogen oxide. So these gases are undesirable and are most often let out by the animal from the mouth, and less amount of this gas is let out from the nostrils and even the anus. Now, a certain group of bacteria known as methanogens or archaea are capable of methanogenesis, or methanogenesis is basically the biochemical pathway that is utilized to get rid of all the extra hydrogen gas that is produced as a product of fermentation. Now, this methane production is highly undesirable for the environment and the animal, as the animal loses up to 3 to 12% of the gross energy intake in the form of methane. 4 moles of hydrogen gas are utilized to give 1 mole of methane. So this reaction can be written as CO2 plus 4H2 will give us methane and 2 water molecules. So, methane produced from the rumen is referred to as enteric methane. Methane is a lot more harmful when compared to CO2 as a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases are gases that negatively impact the climatic conditions of our Earth and also contribute towards global warming. The idea is to reduce these emissions. We can expect up to 10 to the power 7 or 10 to the power 9 cells per ml of methanogenic bacteria or archaea in the rumen fluid. And most or 2/3 of these methanogens belong to the genus Methanobrevibacter or even Methanosarcina. So let us understand a little bit more about methane production. So the ingested feedstuff is broken down, or these polymers or these complex carbohydrates are broken down into their constituent monomers. And then this monomers undergo a lot of changes, fermentation, and volatile fatty acids such as acetate, butyrate, or even propionate are produced. Now, propionic acid is the only neoglucogenic volatile fatty acid. Glucose is broken down to obtain ATP, but there is only a limited number of ATP that can be obtained from fermented glucose. So very often we try to convert this propionic acid back into glucose to get more metabolizable energy. There are several other factors that can determine how much of methane is going to be produced. One of the factors that determine that is the retention time, or the amount of time that the feedstuff spend in the fermentation chamber. Now, if the animal consumes more food that is difficult to degrade, or if the food needs to be regurgitated more usual than often, then the food tends to stay in the rumen for longer, and this will definitely result in more methane emission. Climate is also something that affects methane production. Giving the animal appropriate feedstuff can definitely effectively reduce the amount of methane that is produced by the animal. So one such acceptable and commonly fed feedstuff is legumes. Legumes or leguminous plants belong to family Fabaceae, and they are identified for the pods or their seeds. Examples of different types of legumes include peanuts, soybean. Now, legumes are known for their high protein content and have several nutritional benefits to the cows. They are also known to contain high NDF or ADF, which is the fiber content, and they are low in fats. So, um, legumes can constitute almost 30 to 35% of the ration, and cows will do really well on such a balanced ration. They also contain certain secondary metabolites. We will speak more about plant secondary metabolites in a second, but these legume forages are also great sources of plant secondary metabolites such as tannins, saponins, essential oils, and even flavonoids. We are going to be focusing on tannins today, and condensed tannins are a type of tannins. Plants are known to contain certain phytochemicals. This image shows us that tannins are a subclass of plant polyphenols, and they are of two types. We have condensed tannins and hydrolyzable tannins. Condensed tannins are known to contribute more towards reducing methanogenesis. So we will speak more about condensed tannins today. And here we can see terpenoids here. So essential oils can usually be of terpenoid origin or non-terpenoid origin. So this slide shows us more about the secondary metabolites present in legumes: saponins, essential oils, and condensed tannins. Over here, we can also see certain plant examples. So for saponins, alfalfa and clover are known to contain saponins. They are also known to contain essential oils, and bird's foot trefoil and sainfoin are also plants that contain condensed tannins. A little bit more about condensed tannins. They interact with the rumen microbiota directly and can affect carbohydrate fermentation. These condensed tannins can also prevent bloat, and these condensed tannins usually comprise of one or two large groups of tannins and are known as proanthocyanidins. This group is very commonly found in the plant kingdom. These plant compounds were initially known as anti-nutritional factors because they limited the availability of certain nutrients. This is an image of tannin structures, saponin structures, and the proanthocyanidin structures type A and type B. I would like to use this image to show the various plant sources, the various compounds such as condensed tannins, saponins present in them, and their effect on certain microorganisms. We can clearly see that the number of methanogens are either going up or down in certain situations due to the presence or absence of certain compounds in vitro. This image shows us how within the same family we can see different levels of tannins and saponins present. I would like to use this image to explain primary and secondary metabolites more, and say that primary metabolites are mostly used for primary metabolic processes such as photosynthesis, respiration, and usually secondary metabolites are used for functions such as protecting the plant from predators, and they can also have an influence on parasites, and they also reduce methanogenesis like we just saw. And this image here can be used to understand that the sunlight exposure while legumes are growing can also determine how much tannins are present in them. And this image again shows us that legumes or lentils are great sources of polyphenols and other phytochemicals such as phytosterols, saponins. So there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows us that plants, or three commonly fed plants, alfalfa, clover, and bird's foot trefoil, significantly reduce methane. This image here shows us that feeding certain leguminous plants to ruminants can definitely have beneficial effects of reducing the amount of methane that is produced. Saponins, tannins, and essential oils, all of them have their own mode of actions. For example, saponins have more of an effect on the protozoans, and they impact the archaea that are in a symbiotic relationship with the protozoans, and they disrupt the cell membrane of the protozoans. So over here, we can see that the methanogenesis, there is a shift over here, and most of the hydrogen is being redirected to the propionate formation, like we just discussed, which is called propionogenesis. And with the generation of propionic acid, using this hydrogen, it is less available for the archaea to utilize it for methanogenesis. Now, this will favor lesser methane production. So we can try to balance the diet of the cattle rations and modify it in such a way that their performance is still the same. The nutrient utilization is not compromised, but the methane production is much lesser. Rotational grazing allows animals also to incorporate legumes in their diet, and also allows regrowth of grasses during different seasons. Bloating can also be managed by certain additives or certain feedstuff. So like we previously discussed, this slide has several strategies that can be effectively employed to reduce methane emission. Genetics of the host of the ruminant can also contribute. So selective breeding can also effectively reduce methane emissions, and by also burning the grass at the right time, we can reduce unnecessary emissions, and we can also vaccinate against certain methanogens. So these are certain ways in which we can reduce methane emissions. So I would like to conclude saying that incorporating legumes in the diet of ruminants is not only a sustainable option, but it is also going to improve their nutrition, as it has a good amount of crude protein in it. Here are my references, and thank you guys so much for patiently listening to my presentation. Here's some humor for you guys. Thank you.